Awesome. So hi Rob, thanks a lot for joining us today. Really good to have you with us to kickstart our first community stories sessions. So just to start, I'd love to have you introduce yourself to everyone here.
Hi Mo. Yeah, firstly, thanks for inviting me on. I'm Rob Jackson. I'm Head of Information Management Services at RLB Digital, which is a small startup as part of the wider RLB business. I'm an architect by training, and over the last 6, 7, 8 years, I've been an information management consultant, helping clients with information management and building information modeling.
Awesome. Well, we're really glad to have you here, and I mean, you've had a very long, in many ways, like career where you've covered a lot of different areas in information management. And I think it's fair to say that when it comes to Open BIM and information management, you've been one of the people who have really been pushing the industry forward. So always an absolute pleasure. The way we want to take these sessions is we want every one of our community members to present a big idea that they have for the industry. And in many ways, we as a company, Morta, have focused a lot on this concept of database-driven information management. And what many may or may not know is we were driven there as a result of you. And I would argue that you're the person who coined that term. And off the back of that, we've been using it. So I just love to have you introduce that to everyone. What is database-driven information management? Why do you think it matters? Just talk me through database-driven information management and what it means to you.
Okay, so when I set my previous consultancy up in 2016, I was setting up a digital business with digital in the name, and felt that we had to be digital in terms of how we offered a service. And it didn't start necessarily, even the word database probably wasn't there at the time, but it was kind of looking at platform solutions to kind of move away from, I would call them traditional documentation, the likes of Word, at the time, to try and be smarter and more intelligent and make it more accessible. It was kind of, you would think of it as a website really, in terms of being able to do content. And I had a very early dabble with it on the very first project I looked at. And at the time, the technology wasn't quite mature enough. And I kind of parked it for a while and left it behind. And then we were looking at an internal system for the business I was involved in terms of actually like a company intranet. And we started looking at technology solutions for that, and kind of alongside, what I was doing as both an architect and consultant at the time. And we kind of saw a platform at the time that we thought, oh, I can actually use this to, I think at the time we were looking at like doing a tender for a project with multiple consultants answering questions. And we actually built a solution to kind of almost as an offering to the client to say, here's our collaborative approach as a team. We've put all our answers into a platform, and we've collected them and collated them and refined them. And that solution kind of had some tabular information within it as well. And it had me thinking about, could we repurpose it? And we started to build at the time what I called an information hub for a project. And we tried to put it on a couple of projects and didn't quite get off the ground, unfortunately, at the time. So again, it kind of got parked for a little while. But then probably it would have been beginning of 2019, just after ISO 19650 was released in the December. And we had a bit of a down period in terms of work. And again, it was another opportunity to kind of see whether we could improve process and approach to technology, and started looking at technologies that not only supported the Word side of things, but also the kind of typical things that were done in Excel. And really, it kind of allowed us to actually build kind of solutions that weren't documents. That's why I kind of use the term resources. And I think ISO 19650 doesn't really use the term documents, other than when it refers to appointment documents. And it became an opportunity to start building what now would become databases and database-driven information management. I did a presentation on it a few years ago, and I wouldn't say I was necessarily the first to coin it, but it was something I was quite passionate about. And the reason for that is that, yes, you can put it on a technology platform. I think everyone's used to using, websites and their phone to access information, and PDFs and Excel are quite primitive in how you can do that. Unless you know which document you're going to go and look in or what you're looking for, it can be quite challenging to navigate that. Equally, I've seen so many documents sent to me where a chunk of text is in two different documents, but they're slightly different, and you say, well, which one's correct? And you then have to go through an RFI process back to the client and ask. So kind of databases offer that opportunity really to put information in one place and then potentially put it into multiple places, but from a single source. And also this idea of connecting information. A lot of information relies on other information. So I guess, in your business, a master information delivery plan is a good example where pick lists of values, whether it's the company codes, organization codes, or whether it's functional breakdown, spatial breakdown type stuff, needs to come from another table. Equally, when you spot an error, you want to fix it in one place. And I think that's a smart bit. But I guess the longer term vision is being able to connect these platforms to other platforms. And, Morta is obviously already doing that in places connecting to common data environments. But equally, my vision was much more wider than that and people often criticize IFC and they say it's a file format and say, oh, we don't want to use file formats. But IFC is a data schema. And if we can pass information between systems, between a Morta and authoring tools, or between a federation tool or a common data environment, for me, that was the long-term thing, that we could create consistent, standardized information for our clients that we could then, on top of that, present, analyze and exploit and make better use of in the construction industry. So really talking about, if you don't want to call it database-driven information management, a common data environment with a proper process, proper documentation written around it, and equally not just documents, but videos and embedding things like models and other kind of content within there, so that it moves away from being a simple document and becomes much more interactive, much more user-friendly over time, and becomes kind of really focused on the user as well. So the idea of filtering information specific to different parties, I think databases allow you to do that.
Yeah, absolutely awesome. There's so much to actually go into here, but I think the first thing that I'd ask is, over the last, I think you said just from 2019, you built a version of that. How have you seen the uptake of this concept in the industry over the last 5 or so years? Are you seeing more and more people talk about it? And what is it that you think that's driving effectively that uptake?
I think, partly, I think we obviously used databases and talked about them and promoted, what we were doing, and others would look at it. We obviously I worked with a number of contractors who saw what we were doing and using our sort of approach to that platform. Equally, seeing clients that we both worked together on, in terms of actually progressing that. I think for me, particularly, is big major public clients have really understood the need for information and managing it properly, putting a process in there, not just asking for information and then forgetting about it and going, did we get it at the end? We don't really care, but actually monitoring and maintaining that. So, the Department for Education is a good example where, we did write those requirements in kind of old school documents, and there was good reason for that. I look back on that, I wish I'd written them in a database and then produced the outputs, but that's a whole nother story. But actually the DFE are actually, they have a requirement, and it is monitored and managed because there's a scope of services for their information management function, which is carried out by their technical advisor or TA. So they're monitoring that both in documentation and data terms. And so clients have suddenly kind of realized that they've got to do this process properly, particularly government, because obviously there's a mandate there for them to follow. And, they're starting to do that. And you've seen that with other government departments as well. And because the client's then driving it, the design teams and construction teams and so on have to up their game. And of course, if you're then trying to manage huge amounts of information, whether it's data in a model, whether it's a list of documents, on a common data environment, you've started to see contractors particularly, obviously uptake and buy solutions like yours or invest in solutions like yours to manage that more effectively, more efficiently. It's not about killing people's jobs, but it's about speeding up the process and making it more efficient. Who wants to sit there and go through a list and then half an hour later have to go back through the same list because somebody's updated a few things. You want to do that efficiently and spend your time more efficiently kind of improving that process. And so certainly seen a big contractor uptake in that. Also designers, to some degree on very large jobs have taken that kind of role as well and pushed it forward. So I think, like the community you've tried to create, I think people do kind of share, and we've all been on that kind of journey. Some in more advanced in some areas. I wouldn't say I'm the most advanced user of master information delivery plans by any stretch of the means, but I'm kind of trying to think more about the whole process and the longer vision of this. And equally, I'm ultimately more interested in the data than I am, looking at whether a document's been delivered, although documents are as important as data, and we shouldn't forget that. So, yeah, I have seen the uptake definitely accelerate, and probably even so in the last 12 months. I think I've seen it accelerating more and more, by buying systems or investing in systems that, people have realized that they've got to be digital, particularly now with AI and machine learning in the news. You'd be, unless you're hiding under a rock, you've got to realize you've got to do this properly. And if you put AI on top of junk, it will give you a junk answer. If you do this properly, you'll start to get proper answers and proper responses from the technology that you've invested in.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Like, we are actually seeing one of the things I'm hearing, especially from tier ones, is this concept of future proofing for emerging technologies like AI is actually putting more pressure on ensuring that they have high quality information that's accessible in various ways. And that's definitely been one of the things that they've all been saying. Just curious, I want to pick up on one of the points that you made. You talk a lot about larger projects. Why do you think that why is it that should smaller projects care? Like, why does it start with larger projects? Why is it more important there?
I think that I'll say it's a relatively easy one to answer. I guess bigger projects have ultimately bigger budgets of projects. So, if you take a fee and it's X fee, and I take an information management fee to a contractor, if that fee is, as a percentage of the job, very, very small, and we are talking, 0.00 whatever it is of a fee, it's easy to justify. And you can also spend a little bit more time in that fee finessing a few processes and getting it a little bit more right. With the smaller jobs, you're often, certainly from a consultant perspective, you are cutting your fee to compete against others providing a fee who perhaps aren't using those databases or aren't providing the efficiency. I think ultimately, though, once you've got working with clients who understand what good and best practice looks like, sometimes they will then be prepared to pay that fee, whether they absorb it somewhere else or pay you, a one-off cost or what have you. It doesn't mean you can't apply this to small jobs. A lot of what I've done in the past has applied to some of the schools projects, which are 6 to 12 million. They're not tiny, but they're not big either. And there's certainly, you've got to get through a lot of them, and you've got to be efficient to deliver that. So you do need to invest in templates, and you can't just sit there and write a BIM execution plan, for example, from scratch. But if I write a BIM execution plan for a £500,000 job or a £500 million job, there's not a lot of difference between those two things. It's a team of people to deliver it, it's software to deliver it, and so on. So as you scale, the information management bit, particularly if you're being smart, actually costs you a lot less. Equally, of course, if you're a smart contractor or a smart client, you want to apply it to much smaller things if you possibly can, and you get that efficiency from perhaps some of the bigger jobs that can be reinvested. I guess my message to many clients is, your information is an asset as much as your physical building is, and whether it is a £1 million job or a £100 million job, that information is still valuable. And as somebody pointed out, is there a minimum as a consultant, value I would do? And probably there is, but equally, if you said to me there's 100 £1 million jobs, I could probably apply a lot of efficiency and standardization across that as much as I could if I did one job that was 10 million. So it depends, in terms of looking at it. So yeah, I think to summarize, the big jobs ultimately are the testing beds and testing grounds for a lot of this, because they do have a little bit more wriggle room in those fee proposals.
Yeah, but I guess part of why I asked was, isn't isn't the fact that they're more complex and have more supply chain members in itself part of the reason? Like rather than having all of these different Excel files that have to be created per supply chain member. Obviously, I appreciate and we do think that they're usually the best places for templates to get us set up because there's more resource on them and all of that. But isn't there more risk because there are more parties that are involved in these, and the concept of views and databases becomes really useful? Like how do you think about that?
Well, absolutely. And when I say there's a bit more wriggle room in the bigger jobs, I'm talking about a risk pot essentially, because you don't, because over a long job of 3, 4, 5, even more years, you've got to have some kind of wriggle room to predict, some of the things that might go wrong in that. Shorter jobs, they're much quicker and much smarter. So I'd apply this process, whether it is a, £500,000 job or a £500 million job. I'm not distinguishing between those two things. But equally, spending in a database, it can be challenging in that regard. So, for me, it's kind of it applies to all. And you're right, you're introducing risk. So, I'd like to think that what we offer as a consultancy is to reduce risk. That's what we're trying to do. More efficiency, more better processes, get people using technology that's fun to use and not just using Word and Excel.
Yeah, awesome. And I guess if you had to give it, you've been doing this for a few years. What's one tip you'd give someone who's embarking on this journey to moving from Word and Excel into a database-driven approach?
Really simply, don't be scared of the word database. I didn't call it a database to start with, and if you'd said to me database, that I remember looking at databases years ago, what I would call proper, coded databases. A lot of this stuff now, like your platform, is low code, no code. If you want to do coding, you can do. I'm certainly no expert, but I've learned a bit of Python scripting and a bit of regular expressions through my journey. But in reality, it's not. It's no different to using Word and Excel to many. For many, even those basic tables that you create. I'd say, look, forget the kind of word database and just think about doing this in a consistent way, and starting. You don't have to do everything. You have to solve all the problems on day one. You can start very small, but equally, I would say think about the bigger picture as well. So don't just think, oh, I need to do an MIDP. How does that MIDP fit into a bigger picture ultimately? ISO 19650 is much bigger than managing documents in an MIDP. That doesn't mean to say that's not the place you should start, but all I'm saying is you do need to think about where you want to be with, an ideal platform approach to this kind of approach. So, scalability is kind of thinking, for me, I would love it if our platform had project management stuff in, project execution plan and all the rest of it, had cost management. And obviously, as part of the wider RLB business, we potentially can do that over time. But I'm certainly not starting there. I'm not starting with I need to get a project execution plan template in there. But I am thinking about how that could be dropped in or inserted into there in the future, to create an even more valuable template.
Yeah. I love that. Like, I think start small, think big is in many ways definitely what I'd encourage people over. And they definitely need to think about the scalability of the approach that they pick and the systems that they choose. And I guess, to be honest, I'd be remiss if I don't ask this. And with that in mind, I'm just curious. Obviously, we're not the only solution in the world that offers this type of approach. How do you see us comparing to some of the other solutions on the market that could support effectively some of these things? Like, why are you ultimately using Morta now?
Look, it's fair to say every technology solution, without exception, has pros and cons. And there are things I like in other technology solutions that I've used in the past or would like to borrow, and so on. And equally, there are things in your technology solution that I would, if I went back another way, I would like to use as well. So it works both ways. I think the key things for me, what are the reasons for using Morta? One is that the data is in the UK, which is a big thing from a security perspective. That and that was one of the first questions that our IT asked me. Where's the data? Obviously, if I want to work globally, that's a different question. But that's a big one. Secondly, that it's a single platform that does both the documentation side, like the textual side, and the tabular side in a single solution. Again, there are solutions that do that, but they're perhaps not the strongest in that regard. And I think then also the connectivity. And again, some of those other solutions out there do have connectivity, but I guess it's the connectivity within construction that's important. And obviously those integrations and, what single click, if you like, integrations are over time are going to be more and more important. And as I said earlier, connecting these platforms to different solutions, it is kind of the key to a lot of what we're trying to achieve. Ultimately, we're not just trying to write documents, we are trying to write what I would call smarter information management resources, is kind of how I refer to it. I guess moving on from that database driven information management. And that's kind of, to me, is, kind of the power of what the Morta platform allows us to do. The other thing is, because it's a single platform, it does allow us to build a single template, and duplicate that template without having to kind of, and I'll say, mess about. We've done it before with a couple of solutions stuck together, or 2 or 3 solutions, and that duplication process is a little bit more tedious. It's not massively painful, but simply being able to duplicate, is a lot. And then a final thing I would say is that ability to allow users into the platform, through permission controls to, contribute to the data, is a really important thing that a lot of other platforms would add significant cost to. The MIDP process being an example of one of those. And yes, you can do it through forms in other platforms, and that works in many instances. But if you want to update Kobe data, for example, in the platform, other solutions, you're going to be adding significant cost, or you're going to be reintroducing an Excel or a CSV workflow in there somewhere. So for me, those are the kind of the probably the big ones around Morta itself.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's like sometimes even things like pricing models, they get lost on people, but I think it's ultimately because we focus on the industry, we deeply understand how this is going to work, and we even try to optimize these types of things to make it easy for the person who we want to price for the people that we're adding value to, and that's ultimately the people who are aggregating the information and are benefiting from this, not the people who are contributing to the process per se. Awesome. I guess, do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to share with everyone, or any final words when it comes to when it comes to all of this?
Not particularly. I think I would say is, as I said earlier, don't be scared by it. Don't be scared by the word database. And the beauty of Morta, as you said, just touching on pricing models, is you can start for free. You can just play around with it. I built my CV in it before I joined RLB Digital, partly because, again, I wanted to be digital. I want to get my fee proposals in there as well at some point. They're thinking about that, and just taking very boring standard processes and playing around with the technology and having a bit of fun with it, even if it's in your spare time. But I think everyone will see some benefit if they start to play with the tool and start to use it for particular processes you want to apply. I think if you just say to somebody, go and use it, with no idea what they want to do, you'd never get anywhere. But if you said, right, I've got a Word document, or I've got an Excel template, and I want to play around with it, that to me is kind of where you should start, just having a go and seeing what you can do with it. And obviously reach out to the Morta team if you need a little bit of help, or if you want some help from ourselves, then you can do as well. But I think you just got to get stuck in and start somewhere.
Oh, awesome. Thanks a lot for sharing that, Rob. You're always one of the first people that we work with on everything, and it's no different here. This is our first time doing the community stories, and it's really exciting to have you share your insights with us and your experience. For joining us today and taking the time.
Thanks, man.
I'm gonna